G'day guys, I'm D-Mac from NBA Fantasy Bible, and along with me as always is Kayla Fonte. Together we're Between Two Hoops. Kayla, how are you going?
I'm doing well, just recovering from that crazy trade deadline. How about you?
Crazy trade deadline. Not much happened in the last few hours of the deadline. I think a lot of it happened yesterday, but let's go through it. We're going to review the trade deadline. Shall we get into it?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it indeed. Headlined obviously by Luka and De'Aaron Fox, but we'll start a bit of a recap of the trades from a few days ago. But obviously, Luka for AD was massive. We won't go over that in great detail because we have done so previously, but just wanted to remind you of that trade. Same goes for the Fox for the Levine trade. The details are down there. So thanks again to Shams, of course, but we've discussed this one on our previous episode. Now, let's get into some of the latest ones by trade deadline. But this one is interesting in the fact that it doesn't really impact fantasy, but in terms of real life, there were some discussions quite recently around possibly voiding this trade, but it looks like it's going through. But Dallas is sending Quentin Grimes to the 76ers for Caleb Martin. Any implications here from a fantasy perspective, Kayla?
I think for the Sixers, nothing really changes that much. Grimes is still going to continue in that reserve role. He could add streaming value whenever Maxey is out, but aside from that, I'm not adding him. With Dallas too, I think they have a lot of forwards at the moment, even though Martin is currently injured. I think he's set to return in about 2 to 3 weeks. A bit of a logjam there, so I'm not really looking to add anyone.
Yeah, it's a strange one from the Dallas perspective and sort of continues the flow and the theme for them, this trade deadline. But yeah, strange one. I really liked Quentin Grimes. I thought he had a really nice game. And when he has been given the opportunity, he has looked really good. And we saw that a fair bit with Lucas sidelined, Kyrie sidelined for some time. But yeah, no moves to me. I don't think he's a must add in 12 teamers for me. Next one, we spoke about this one, but Chris Middleton for Kyle Kuzma. What are your thoughts on this one?
This is an interesting one. I'm kind of intrigued by Kuzma's fit in Milwaukee. He's going to be the third option offensively, but I think that this new situation could actually end up helping him. I mean, he's had a horrible season, so I don't think it can get worse than what it already was. So I think it slightly raises Kuzma's value.
Is he a pickup in 12 teamers?
Maybe like speculative ad, but I don't consider him like a must roster player. I kind of want to see how things shape up a little bit first.
Yep.
So yeah.
Is he more suited to points leagues? I would say he's more suited to points leagues.
Yeah, I would say so too. I mean, his main attribute is scoring, and that tends to bode well better for points leagues.
Yeah, and from a dynasty perspective, you also got AJ Johnson in there, Patrick Baldwin. They're not going to do anything in redraft 12 teamers this season, but yeah, keep an eye out in dynasty, particularly for AJ Johnson. Next one here doesn't have many fantasy implications, but Jericho Sims was also part of that deal as well. So he's going to the Bucks as well. So no implications there. We'll move on.
Yeah, nothing
quickly.
here.
Nothing here. Now, this one's been updated recently, but the Boston Celtics traded Jaden Springer to the Houston Rockets. But since then, the Rockets have recently just waived Springer. So he is now a free agent. So we'll see what happens. He's on the waiver to be picked up by anyone who's interested. But again, had he stayed on the Rockets, he wouldn't have been much of any implications in fantasy anyway.
Yeah, they got too much young talent already too.
They do. Another one that went through as a trade, but also Daniel Tice has also been waived since then.
Mhm.
So next one. Now, this is the big one. A bit to unravel here, but obviously Jimmy Butler's going to the Golden State Warriors. Massive, massive deal. Quite a few players have moved, but Lindy Waters and Josh Richardson originally were headed to Detroit. Since then, Josh Richardson went to Utah and then has now been waived. So a fair bit going on for Josh Richardson. He hasn't played, I would say, much at all, but much this season. So he's not a factor in fantasy. Miami obviously get Andrew Wiggins. Is that good or bad for his value?
I think it's bad just because Miami has so many forwards right now. And my heart goes out to Jovic because I really was hoping that he was going to be a great stack, but I guess not. Even Ware too. Anderson's on the team. Like there's a lot of forwards that they have right now, so I don't think it helps. I'm not going to drop Wiggins. I'm going to monitor everything and see how the minutes are distributed, but it doesn't help.
And Jimmy Butler, obviously, he wasn't playing much. And when he was
Mhm.
playing, when he wasn't suspended, he was playing half-assed. I'll use that term.
Yeah.
He wasn't playing at his full capacity. But does this trade help him? And those that did hold on, are they happy now?
I think it does help just because he gets that fresh start with Golden State. So maybe he's more happy and that'll encourage him to play better. I think it's just overall a better situation for him than with Miami. We all know that was going to end really, really badly. So I think the best case scenario was him getting moved.
Yeah, and he signed an extension as well. It's pretty lucrative for someone of a guy that doesn't play every single game. So hopefully there is that motivation factor there. But yeah, big trade, lots to look out for. But obviously Jimmy Butler should already be owned, as should Andrew Wiggins for now, he was saying. Also, just a side note, we'll just go back there. Dennis Schroeder. So he was moved to Utah, and then since then he's been moved to Detroit. And it sounds like Detroit will hold on to Dennis Schroeder. So I don't think he's a must-add guy right now, but it's someone to look out for because he could play some significant minutes down the stretch.
Yeah, I think his value is a little bit better just because with the Warriors, I mean, it really went down after he had a really good stint with the Nets. And as we
Mhm.
know, Jaden Ivey's injured for a long period of time. So he could slot in and have some good usage there.
And who does that impact on the Detroit Pistons?
It's going to mainly be Hardaway and Beasley as well.
Yeah, okay. Let's see how that plays out. Good to have a second facilitator, I guess, as well. Hopefully it doesn't impact Cade Cunningham too much. Next one, and this one impacts your team, Brandon Ingram.
Honestly, from a real life perspective, I'm not a big fan of the trade. And even for fantasy too, like this is really going to take a hit to the Raptors' key players. So quickly, Barnes, Barrett, it's going to hurt them. I don't see Ingram really improving his value that much with the Raptors because a lot of his value also comes down to his health. And we all know about his lengthy injury history. Something to watch out for. It'll be interesting to see how things work out, but not a big fan.
And no surprise that Bruce Brown was moved. I think that was almost a given coming into this trade deadline period. He could be a buyout candidate, but for now, he's rolling with the Pelicans. We'll see how that all plays out. But Kelly Olynyk as well, one of your native Canadians, he was moved as well. So that's got to be a little bit disappointing too.
Yeah, it was a little bit disappointing. They could have given up like players who I liked a little bit more, and I would have been more hurt by that. But I do still like Olynyk. It's rough to hear.
Yeah, I was playing around in Trade Machine and it looked like it was going to be either Olynyk or Boucher, just trying to match up salaries. But yeah, not a big
Yeah.
surprise when the rumors did come out about Ingram going to Toronto. But interesting because I discussed Kelly Olynyk as potential late season shenanigans winner, potentially
hmm
if Yucca Purtle was going to sit some games as well, but not to be. But perhaps does he have a role on the Pelicans?
I don't think he's really going to have a significant role. I'm definitely not adding him. Someone to monitor down the stretch, but I think that's it.
So he'll play behind Yves Missi, you would expect, but
Mhm.
sort of it fits nicely with Zion Williamson. Williamson obviously doesn't shoot the three ball very much. Kelly Olynyk can space the floor, so perhaps that does help his situation. But yeah, someone I'm monitoring, but like you said, not an add in 12 teamers.
Mhm.
Next one, this is massive, but the Lakers, I think they've won trade deadline period quite easily, but they've
Mhm.
acquired Mark Williams.
Yeah, I don't think this really changes Mark Williams' value that much, just because he's still going to be that starting center for the Lakers. Um, yeah, so not really many fantasy implications for him. Do you agree?
I think per game, it doesn't change too much. And if anything, there's probably less for him to do. But I think the chances of him sitting are a lot less. With
Yes.
the
Yeah.
tanking Charlotte Hornets, I thought they're going to look after his or their asset. He's still a young guy, but also quite injury prone. Obviously, had that long history with his back, which is another discussion point with the Lakers as well. So they've acquired someone who's up and coming 23-year-old, fit well with LaMelo Ball, but has had lengthy injury history. But I think it's a great trade nonetheless for the Lakers. For the Hornets, I can see why they've done it. Maybe they've just tried to maximize his value whilst he is playing, and maybe there is some concerns about his longevity in the game. But getting Dalton Connect, who's Actually, I believe 8 months older than Mark Williams, which is crazy to think about. It's a good fit, and I think he'll play and play a fair bit.
I think so too, and I'd be willing to add him just like speculatively and see how things shape up because LaMelo Ball is still injured as well for a little bit longer.
Yeah, I've added him in 3 leagues, I believe. I had to get in quickly. I think there was a few bids going on as well for Dalton Connect. I think he's just got that ability. We saw what Nick Smith was doing without LaMelo Ball on the floor. Nick Smith was putting up a lot of shots. I think Dalton Connect will do something similar, if not more so than Nick Smith.
Mm.
So, yeah, another one to look out for, but I think a big one for the Lakers from a real life perspective and interesting from a fantasy perspective as well. Next one, not much going on here, but Reggie Jackson was traded to Washington for Jared Butler and a lot of picks as well, pick swaps. Since then, Reggie Jackson's been waived by the Wizards, which makes sense. They've got a whole heap of guys on that squad now and a few older guys. Bit of an interesting lineup now, but yeah, nothing of note here in terms of fantasy.
Yep.
Although having said that, Jared Butler was someone I was looking out for in terms of silly season for the Wizards, but not to be now. Moving on, another one of your former guys, but Davion Mitchell's moved.
Yeah, this doesn't really impact fantasy at all. Davion Mitchell is going to be like the third backup point guard, so it doesn't really make much of a difference for the Heat. And PJ Tucker's like 39 years old, so not really watching him.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Davion obviously still behind. Hero will behind Rozier as well. So not a 12-teamer, but someone to keep an eye out for in deeper leagues. That's all. This one is probably the most interesting one of the day, and this is use of Nurkic being moved, and something that we spoke about on our stash show a couple of weeks ago. But use of Nurkic has been moved. But does this kill Musa Diabate's value now?
I think it does slightly just because I'm assuming that Nurkic is going to be starting for the Hornets, but I'm still watching out for him in silly season. And I think we could all agree that Nurkic is one of the biggest winners from the trade deadline, just because he was giving you, as you like to say, donuts with the Suns. He wasn't being played. I mean, the relationship was just trashed. So at least now he has likely a starting role and can revive some of his value.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he does start. I think he will to begin with, like you said, but those that did pick up Musa Diabate, and him and Dalton Connect, top 2 guys picked up overnight for good reason. I wouldn't be rushing to drop him if you can hold on to him. I just wanted to see how the starting lineup shapes up for now, but yeah, it does hurt his value significantly. Going the other way, Cody Martin, Vasily Micic, which is also disappointing for his value because he was putting up some decent value even for 12-teamers whilst LaMelo Ball was sidelined.
Yeah, I think he can still have like some streaming value, but I mean, yeah, it just kills it.
Yeah, it's a tough one with quite a few of those superstars being high usage guys on the Suns. Next one. This is interesting from a real life perspective, and it also impacts DeAndre Hunter. But Hunter going to the Cleveland Cavs. I know quite a few Cavs fans are quite happy with this. Karis LeVert going the other way with George Niang and some picks as well.
Yeah, I really like this move from a real life perspective. Great trade for the Cavs, but yeah, it just kills Hunter's fantasy value, and I think he's just a drop.
You think he's a drop? Yeah, I think he's a drop as well. But I would still like to see how it plays out just with that starting lineup, whether or not he starts, whether or not he comes off the bench like he has been for Atlanta. What about Karis LeVert? What does this do for his value?
I don't really think it helps his value just because, I mean, the Hawks were very, very active at the trade deadline, so they were adding a lot of players. I think there's a little bit of a logjam at some positions, so I don't really see Karis LeVert's position improving.
Yeah, I know Bogdanovic. We haven't spoken about him, but he's been moved. So perhaps LeVert comes in as that secondary facilitator behind Trae Young, Dyson Daniels. Perhaps he plays that role, similar to what he was doing at the Cleveland Cavaliers. But let's watch this one, but it does impact Hunter significantly. Next one, the Clippers are trading Terrence Mann and Bones Highland to the aforementioned Bogdanovic. Thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think the Bogdanovic side of it is kind of interesting. I'm willing to hold and or monitor to see just how things work out. I think he's going to have that six-man role. The only
Mhm.
problem with Bogdanovic is just staying healthy. He's had so many injury concerns this year, and that's really just like plummeted his value. So if he could stay healthy and, revive some of his value, then I'd be willing to add.
So you're willing to add or hold, as you were saying, but yeah, willing to
Mhm.
add. Speculative add. I'm not
Yeah, more
100%
spec.
sold at this stage, but yeah, he could be someone to add if you do have that free slot on your roster. Now, some really minor ones here. Atlanta Hawks traded Cody Zeller. Yes, he was on the Hawks roster for a 2028 second round pick to the Rockets. So pretty inconsequential there. And the Indiana Pacers, again, inconsequential here, trading James Wiseman, who was out for the season.
Mhm.
So nothing to speak about there.
Yep.
This one's interesting. This one happened pretty close to the deadline itself, but the Kings acquired Jake LaRavia from the Grizzlies.
I don't think this has significant fantasy implications, but Laravia is someone who I would probably monitor as a streaming option.
Yeah, I think it's a really good one for the Kings from a real life perspective. From fantasy, like you said, he's probably more like a 14 teamer consideration at this stage. But he's a good role player. He's solid when he does get that opportunity to play some extra minutes as well. But yeah, more streamer level guy for me too. Another sort of borderline or a streaming sort of guy, but Kevin Porter Jr. is going to the Bucks.
Yeah, he had like some pockets of value um, with the Clippers. Nothing really significant, but mainly just like a streamer opportunity on the Bucks.
And Marjon Beauchamp going to the Clippers. Does he get much of a role there?
I don't really think so. I'm not really making any moves here.
Okay. So no Terrence Mann, but Marjon Beauchamp and Bogdanovic. Yeah, some wings going back. It'll be, yeah, like you're saying, it's no one really of note to pick up in a 12-teamer, but something to monitor if there is some resting going on or some streaming ability there. Next one. So a little bit of moving parts here, but Marcus Smart is going to the Washington Wizards. Wizards now have Smart, now have Chris Middleton. So going a little bit older now and still have Malcolm Brogdon on the roster.
Yeah, I think they're mainly there just to provide that veteran presence, but I don't think, at least I don't hope, that they're going to take away a lot of minutes from the younger guys who they should be prioritizing down the stretch since they have like literally nothing to play for.
Marvin Bagley going back to the Grizzlies as part of that deal. Anything of note there?
Not really for me. Maybe a possible streamer due to injuries, but nothing beyond that.
Or Johnny Davis as well. Yeah, that's inconsequential in 12 teamers, but he's also going to the Memphis Grizzlies there. And finally, the one that we've been dreading, but the notable players that were not traded, we're all hoping for Nikola Vucevic train just to free up our man Jalen Smith, wasn't to be.
Yeah, unfortunately not. I was really banking on this one because Jalen Smith, I mean, he just got so much potential, but maybe next year.
Yeah, his per minute production was monstrous, and we were just hoping for that breakout once Vucevic, well, if Vucevic was to be moved. And by all accounts, there was some pretty heavy discussions with the Golden State Warriors, but nothing eventuated, obviously. So that's disappointing from that perspective. Does Vucevic play much down the stretch for the Bulls?
I think the minutes probably will decline a little bit, so that's possibly when Jalen Smith will have a little bit more of an opportunity.
Yeah, but we know the Bulls, they love being mediocre. So he'll probably still
Mhm.
play some pretty good minutes and try to go for the ninth seed and see what happens there. But yeah, it's just classic Bulls sort of situation there. I thought with the trade of Zach LaVine, here we go, let's open it up. It's go time, let's rebuild. But yeah, not to be with Vooch, unfortunately. Next one here I thought was a given as well. But Cam
Yeah.
Johnson, disappointingly not traded away from the Nets.
Yeah, really surprising here. But the good thing is that, I mean, they're still a tanking team. So a lot of the stashes that we discuss will still have value later in the season.
Yeah, and there's quite a few nets that have been rolling through as streamers, but yeah, interesting that Cameron Johnson wasn't moved, particularly to a contender. But yeah, maybe the asking price was too much, and he's not young, but he's also not that old as well. So perhaps they see him as part of the future on the Nets. But yeah, disappointing not to see him move. Next one is Robert Williams, that three-headed monster at the center position. still in Portland. So Robert Williams wasn't moved. Obviously, DeAndre Ayton wasn't moved, and Donovan Clingan is behind probably both of them at this stage. So that Clingan stash, very early days that we spoke about, that isn't coming to fruition. Having said that, silly season winner, I could still see Donovan Clingan playing a factor there.
Yeah, I think he's going to be huge in silly season. But this is really surprising just because, like you mentioned, there's that three-headed monster problem that they have. So the fact that they didn't move on from at least one of their centers, it was shocking to me.
Yeah, and a few days ago, they came out and said that Robert Williams was going to play ahead of Donovan Clingan, which was interesting, I guess, maybe just to look after Clingan's minutes as well. But yeah, it's hard to know whether or not Clingan's the number 2 or if he's the number 3. But like we said, silly season, keep an eye out because Clingan could be a really nice pickup later on. There was some speculation around Kevin Durant, but he's still with the Suns, which is good for them. Devin Booker was also thrown around as, you hear these crazy trade rumors, but obviously not to be for the Suns. So they're pretty stable apart from Nurkic moving out, which is a good thing for them.
Mm-hmm.
Plethora of Jazz players that were, I guess, on the trade table, but none of them were moved. Walker Kessler has been fantastic, and I don't think was necessarily on the trade table, but there was a lot of conversations, particularly before the Lakers acquired Mark Williams.
Yeah, there was so many rumors going around, like several of the players on the team. The good news is that they're also a silly season team, so a lot of other guys we talked about as stashes will still have that value.
Yeah, so Isaiah Collier is still a great guy to have. He's been picked up everywhere. We spoke about him as a stash 2 or 3 weeks ago. So he was picked up pretty heavily then, and he should be rostered everywhere now. If he's not, for some reason, go and pick him up because he's playing really well. He's starting, and like you said, silly season shenanigans from a lot of teams, including the Jazz. He's going to be a monster. Same goes for Keontae George. Colin Sexton's still there. Jordan Clarkson's still there. So, yeah, just keep an eye out for their availability moving forward. Colin Sexton's injured at the moment. So, a bit more for Keontae George and Isaiah Collier to do right now. John Collins as well was someone that was spoken about at length as a trade candidate, but he's still on that team as well. Mm-hmm. We spoke about Malcolm Brogdon. He's still on the Washington Wizards. So they've got quite a few veterans on that team. I don't think they're going to be playing every game or huge minutes every game for this, just to allow their younger guys to play more.
Yeah, I don't think they'll get a lot of playing time either, especially with Brogdon too. Like, he's so injury prone that I wouldn't be surprised if something else happens to him at some point.
That is true. That is true. Kobe White, not necessarily needed to be traded, but there was more speculation around him. But like Vooch, he remains a Chicago Bull. And Nick Claxton, this one was more speculation, but also we knew that Day'Ron Sharpe was just a per-minute monster as well. So I was hoping for some sort of movement just to be able to unlock Day'Ron, but not to be. That's a wrap, Kayla. Do you have any final words around trade deadline or anything that's coming up?
Well, one thing, I actually just realized that Clint Capella wasn't traded either. I totally forgot about him in the midst of all the craziness, and sucks for Okongwu, but maybe next year.
Yeah, well, Okongwu's still starting, so he's a nice backup right now. And also, let's just keep in mind buyout season as well. So there's a few candidates that could be bought out. I know with the new rules regarding first apron, second apron, some of the old school moves that some of the more prominent teams, let's say the Lakers, would make, whereby a team would be buying out a player, let's say a Ben Simmons, for example, for someone to swoop in like the Lakers and just pick him up off of waivers. That's more difficult to do now these days. But yeah, keep an eye out for the buyout market anyway, because there could be some big names that could be made available. So watch this space, keep up to date with all of the news. Make sure you follow Kayla on Twitter and Blue Sky at Kayla_Fonte. Find myself at NBA Fantasy Bible. Before we go, what's coming up, Kayla?
Yeah, so right now I'm working on winners and losers from the trade deadline from a fantasy perspective. And Yuri and I are also planning on doing a special episode for Bitches Be Balling sometime next week. So stay tuned for that.
Loving that. Looking forward to reading that article as well. Make sure you follow Kayla. Make sure you follow myself. Like and subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere that you consume fantasy basketball. But until next time, thank you guys. Another trade deadline done and dusted, but anticlimactic, but still fun nonetheless. Thank you guys, and we'll see you next time.